Now, Estate Planning 101 with attorney Leigh Cowden of Vermillion Law.
Welcome back, everyone. Leigh Cowden with Vermillion Law Firm is back with us. How have you been?
I've been great. How have you been?
Doing well. It's really hot this summer so far, especially this week leading up to 4th of July. You got any big plans for the end of the weekend?
Yeah, I've got all the kids in town from out of town, so we're going to be in the pool.
Right on. That's the best way to spend 4th of July. But taking a look at what we want to talk about today. So in estate planning, you know, sometimes when you're trying to get a lot of people involved, a lot of families are not always the same. You're kind of blending in with a lot of different families if there might be children with amongst other partners. But you know, what makes that complicated, that process of estate planning, when there's multiple blended parties and blended families involved?
Well, that's a great question because so many people are part of a blended family. And so we have maybe children that came from a first marriage, the marriage didn't work out or somebody passed away, and now we have a second marriage, potentially children brought in from that new partner in a relationship they had, and then maybe even a child born of this new partnership. So we can have all kinds of relationships, and sometimes the children and the adults get along, and sometimes they don't get along. Sometimes they live close, sometimes they live far, sometimes they become estranged. You know, there's all kind of things that can happen, and all of that needs to be taken into consideration when you're designing an estate plan.
And we're going to take a look at more case studies today, all former actors with all children who are coincidentally in the entertainment industry themselves, but they still had estates, trust in place. But first one we're going to take a look at is Robin Williams. He had a trust for his kids in place, but there was some conflict there. So what happened with what he was trying to plan?
Yeah, so Robin Williams had a trust which allows assets to pass on to beneficiaries without having to go through the probate process. But he was a little bit, or his lawyers were a little bit ambiguous in the way they described some things. So for example, he said, my personal property or my memorabilia to my children. But the question was, what is memorabilia? Does that include his Oscars? Does that include his action figures? Does that include his clothing? So he had a spouse and children from different relationships that were arguing about what is included in the definition of memorabilia. So ambiguities in the documents are definitely a problem.
And then relating that to just everyday families here, is this just, is it just as easy as cut point blank, just this belongs to you, this belongs to you?
So we have what we call a personal property memorandum, which we give to our clients with blank lines on it. And we tell them, if you have something special that you want to go to a special person, write it down, be very clear. So for example, the .45 caliber pistol that I inherited from my grandfather to my grandson Benji. And so yes, this keeps these misunderstandings from breaking up family relationships later.
Another case study, we have Philip Seymour Hoffman. He had a plan, but he didn't directly name his kids, so that's a problem, right?
Yes, and he had done an estate plan, but he had not updated his estate plan. So he had children later that were never mentioned in the first one. And there are ways that we as attorneys can draft your documents to account for children who are born later, so we don't have to make sure they're all named in there. But when you have a child perhaps that's being disinherited and others that aren't, then naming becomes very important. So keeping a plan updated is really important. Your life changes over the years, and your plan should adapt to those changes.
Should that be yearly?
Yearly might be more frequent than most people need. I would say a minimum of 3 years, maybe every 3 years. And of course, if you have any major life events like a new marriage or a death in the family or grandchildren born, things like that, those would usually prompt a review.
In another case, we have James Gandolfini of Sopranos fame. His estate had major tax consequences. What were those, and what were the problems that came after that?
Yeah, so when you have a larger estate, it's especially helpful to take advantage of these estate planning techniques that we can put in place with different types of trusts. Revocable trusts, irrevocable trusts, and these aren't just for the wealthy, by the way, they're for your everyday person. Everyone can do trust-based planning. But in his particular case, because he had such a large estate and he did just a will type plan with no trust, he wasn't able to take advantage of some of those tax savings. Additionally, there was some language in his documents that passed assets on to people without the right language. And so his estate was hit with a huge tax I think $15 million, $20 million that went to Uncle Sam instead of the people that he cared about. So there are some tax advantages that you will have giving assets to your spouse, and those should be taken advantage of, and then ways that you can pass assets on to children and grandchildren in a more tax efficient way.
And what are the biggest risks that you see with blended families here in Tennessee, and maybe things that you have seen personally?
Risks, I would say that when you're in a marriage, you've been in a long-term marriage, you have beneficiaries that you share together, you can actually plan for a potential future remarriage. So if there's a couple and one of them passes away, what happens next? If that surviving spouse gets remarried, it is very easy for the new spouse to end up inheriting those assets. And they generally do not leave them to the children of the first marriage. They leave those assets to their own people. So your children could effectively be disinherited if you're not around to protect them. But you can actually do it in an estate plan before you pass away, so they're protected even if you're not there.
And what should families do to get this right down the line whenever this does come about?
So everybody should do estate planning. I say everybody 18 years of age or older should do estate planning, even if it's just I'm going to college and I need to have power of attorney documents. But once you own a home, once you have any kind of assets of value, it's a good idea to talk to an experienced estate planning attorney. So not everybody works in this area of law. They might draft wills here and there, but they're more specialized in family law or criminal law or something else. So I would recommend people go to a firm that really just does estate planning because, for example, Vermillion Law, that's all we do. We are always in that headspace. So we are on top of the latest trends, on top of the latest case law. So we know the best techniques to protect our clients and their assets and their families.
All right, Leigh, thank you very much. One last question. Fireworks this Saturday? with the family?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. Are you shooting them off?
My son
Your
is
son
in
is,
charge of
okay.
the fireworks, not me.
He's got it under control.
Yeah.
All right. Leigh, thank you very much. Now let's take a look at our forecast with Theo.